I say different things when I'm talking. Sometimes I'll tell jokes while I'm doing my little announcement, plugging my nose and talking about that. All right, you guys, did you guys have a good lunch?
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for coming back and not ditching at lunch. That was awesome. All right, we're going to start talking about designing your school garden. These are creating your school garden on pages 25 to 32. You can follow along with me. All of the information that I talk about, again, is in this manual, and anything other little tidbits that I've added are in the PowerPoint presentation. So just know that you will have these resources when you leave. You'll just have to look through and find them. So let's talk about school garden elements. I'm going to move this so I don't trip on it. What are your needs and wants in the garden? So we're talking about design. We're talking about the students' needs. We're talking about your needs, in fact. The first thing we want to talk about is location. You don't want to start a garden in a shady spot. If that shady spot gets only 2 hours of sun a day, it's not enough. You want to make sure that wherever you locate your garden, it's many things. In the sun, close to water, close to where the kids play all of the time, because you want them to be a part of the garden even when they're not in the garden, okay? You want to open the garden at lunchtime and let them hang out in there. So you want it kind of close to where the kids are going to be. You don't want it around the corner and behind the school, for example, where none of the parents can see it. Water is a huge issue. If you do not have water in your garden, you're going to have a big problem, okay? So make sure that either water can get to your garden by way, if you've got some great maintenance people who will bring you water, or make sure you put a garden where there's already a water spout, okay? So think about that. You also want to make sure that you are not planting over a space that had crabgrass or Bermuda grass. We grow crabgrass and Bermuda grass at almost all California schools for the turf that they grow on because it's drought tolerant. It grows well. It takes a beating. It doesn't stop growing. You don't want that in your garden. Let me tell you, it's a nightmare. So make sure that you're choosing a space that isn't weedy, has plenty of sun, is located in a great location where parents and kids can see it and be in it, and make sure you have tons of sun. Did I say sun twice? Maybe, but water too. You want to make sure that you have a gathering area where you can sit and have some shade. I've used shade cloths. We've draped wire across gardens and added shade cloth that way. We use seating under trees for gathering spot with shade. We actually have also added misters in some of the gardens because the kids love that stuff, and on the hot days, and let me tell you, it gets unbearably hot out there, and if the kids are too hot, that's all they can think about. So make sure you're making it fun for them. Make sure you have water. Let them mist each other with the mister on your hose, okay? Make sure that your gathering area, for us, we use hay bales quite a bit for our gathering seats. And in winter, those hay bales can be really wet. So I often will save the plastic soil bags that we have, and I'll just cut them up nicely, and then the kids can sit on those. They also use those for kneeling on. So when we're in the garden, when it's wet and cold, they can use those plastic soil bags to kneel on. I used to use cardboard because I hate plastic. But I had so many plastic bags, I decided I needed to start reusing them for something. And they fold up really nice and flat, and you can store them very easily, and the kids can use them for all sorts of things. You want to make sure that you have annuals and perennials in your garden. We are creating an ecosystem, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and you must have these annuals and perennials. And that's going to give you your ecosystem, okay? We'll talk about that a little bit later. You're going to maybe want a greenhouse. Not always, but maybe you might want a greenhouse if you have room for it. It could be very small. It could be inside the classroom and a sunny window and a little light. You don't have to have something major for a greenhouse. That's not necessary for school gardens, but it's really nice to have. You're gonna definitely want a tool shed of some sort, and that tool shed needs to be locked. You need to have a lock on it. It needs to be tough. I've had break-ins on tool sheds, so I even make sure that I put really heavy-duty locks on them to kind of deter, and I have heavy-duty doors on my shed as well. So make sure your tool shed is, it could be in a classroom. Your tool shed could be you could just have a little tool closet in a classroom if you wanted, okay? But if you're gonna keep it outside and neighbors and other things other people have access to that tool shed, make sure it's a very tough shed and it has a good lock on it, okay? And that lock is great if you put a combo on there. That way you don't have to pass keys out to everybody. You just have a combo. It can be changed. If something happens, it could be changed. And any of your parents can get into it. Okay, so make it a combo lock. You definitely want to have composting and worms in your garden. Let me tell you, those kids love the worms. It is fascinating. The worms are amazing to have in a classroom or in a garden or outside the classroom. You can have worms everywhere. You can encourage your students to take their leftover lunch and save it and take it to the garden and feed the worms with it. And we'll talk about composting and worms a little bit later in detail. You want to have a food prep area. At my school, my food prep area is just a table anywhere. At my high school, I have a very small greenhouse that I've turned into a kitchen because it's too small, and it was in a really bad location. It got too much heat. And it was so small, all of our plants kind of died in there. So I turned it into a kitchen. And inside there I have an electrical cord that's plugged into a portable, and then it goes all the way. I have it dug under, and it goes all the way in there just so I can have electricity in there. And we cook rice. We have a rice cooker. We have a hot plate where we cook stir fries on all the time. And then we have a toaster oven in there. And of course they can't all be plugged in at the same time. I have to use one at a time, right? So the toaster oven also has a pizza toaster in there. So it's a toaster oven on top. We make bruschetta and different things with the tomatoes and basil in the garden. And we can also make a little pizza. It's a little pizza oven. So having a food prep area, you can be pretty good. It's pretty simple. I spent less than $100 on those things, and now I have a kitchen, okay? Make sure that any knives or anything are always on your body or in something locked. Kids will get in there. They'll steal that stuff. So make sure, especially if they know it's there. So you need to be very careful about making sure that that stuff is put away safely. I also have a water dispenser in my gardens if there aren't any fountains around. Because I can, with my water fountain, I can make hot tea with it, with the kids. Or I can make it cold so that on hot days they can have refreshing cold water instead of just temperature water. Especially for the mint tea is delicious with cold water. And you might want to have a pond. This could be very simple and small, okay? A pond is going to bring in frogs and birds and bees, okay? And then you might want to have some themed beds or art. And so we'll talk about some themed beds in a little bit, what kind of themed beds you might do. So those were all the basic aspects of the garden, and we'll get into each one as we go along here. So school gardens come in all shapes and sizes. I would like, if you don't have a garden already, to think small. Okay? You can have one of these wine barrels next to every classroom. They could have their own garden at their classroom. This could be just on the side of a classroom where there's water, okay? And you can plant in these. You don't have to worry about weeds too much. You don't have to worry about gophers. They're very good at keeping the soil cool, so you don't have to water as much. It's easy to set drip up on these, and it's very small, and you can start very small with your school. Even having one pot is enough for kids to grow radishes or peas, and those take a long time, and it's good for them to see how long that takes to do that. Maybe you want to put a little herb garden in there and put a couple herbs in that barrel, but that's great. Large gardens take years to evolve. My high school garden is 6 years old. We're still working really hard on it. It's not quite complete yet. Our trees haven't started fruiting yet. Not all of our trees have started fruiting yet. They're also very time consuming. The bigger your garden, the harder you're going to have to work. The longer you're going to have to work. So keep that in mind. If you've got a lot of volunteers and you've got it going on, by all means, design a large garden. But I would encourage you guys to try to keep it small at first. See how things go and expand from there. Okay?
And your barrels are great for the root vegetables too, like the carrots and beets.
Yeah, I was just telling you that that's the best way, because you showed me a carrot that was all stumpy, and I said, your soil's not good enough. Just by looking at it. So I told her that a barrel is great because you can put really good soil in that. It's not very expensive. Like if you build a 4x4 bed, that's way more soil. It's going to be really expensive. And if you just have this little barrel, you can grow anything in those barrels, and carrots grow great in them because they need that loose soil and that fresh soil. Here is a garden in Oakland that's just on the side of a classroom. They have art, they have barrels, they have a place to sit, and I don't think you can see here, but there's a compost bin here. Very simple and pretty and decent, very good. Here's another garden on the side of the building. This one has beds, and it's still a very small garden. Here's another one with 6 beds. This garden, that's 6 beds, that's a lot, okay? You could actually cut these beds in half depending on how many classrooms you have, and give half the bed to one classroom, half the bed to the other. So you're starting to give classrooms and students ownership of the garden. We'll talk a lot about that too. Here's another garden. This is it's getting quite big. We've got some pots up here. And lots of beds. It's fenced in, but it's incorporated into the kids' play area. So they can access the garden anytime they want to, which is lovely. This is my high school garden in Felton, California. There's our little greenhouse kitchen right there. And I have gophers at my garden. We have a lot of gophers. So everything is wired, but I can tell you right now that a couple of my gardens that have older beds with gopher wire under are now failing. It hasn't been long enough. It's been maybe 10 years, and that gopher wire fails. Not only that, but this year I had a gopher chew. My beds are thick. They're 2 inches redwood. It's redwood 2 inches thick. And I had a gopher chew a hole into the side of my bed and get into my bed and eat all of the vegetables in 1 week. So last week I went in, everything's growing and it's beautiful. This week we come in and we're like, what happened? Everything gone. So if you have gophers at your school, I would recommend nothing but above ground pots, and we'll talk about that coming up. This is a garden in Long Beach. This is a ginormous garden. And you can tell they've done very great with the pathways are nice and wide. If you have handicap or need to make your garden handicap accessible, make sure that you're doing that and making the ground flat and not having wood chips in there. This is probably something like a gold fines on the ground. They've got pots, they've got a solar system that's running their water fountain right there. They've got a rain gauge. lots of, it's beautiful and everything's kind of overflowing. They've got flowers with their vegetables. They've got different vegetables in the bed, in the same bed and all over. So it's a very, I can tell that this is going to be a great ecosystem garden right here. So let's talk about garden bed types. We have an in-bed garden, okay? And I can say that most of the time this doesn't work for schools because of the gophers. They're really, really bad, and they're hard to control. So these are great in places where you don't have weeds and you don't have gophers at all. And this is another bed here. This is at my house actually. I have a water pond back here, my Michael Moss daisies, and you can see how I'm kind of trying to create an ecosystem for the garden. And I've got lots of debris on the ground that's kind of holding it in, and then just a simple log that goes across to kind of delineate where the pathways are and the ground is. So these two grounds are even and level, but I have something to tell the kids that's plant space, and then this is your walking space, okay? And here's my high school students installing a wire bed into the ground. And I can tell you, we did this one of the first couple of years that I was teaching, and I can't even find that bed anymore because all that grass around it just completely took it over. So my bad. This is what I learned. With weeds, I need to be able to weed whack around. So if you have a lot of grasses, you're gonna want to use pots and only pots. That way you can weed whack around and you don't have to worry about pulling all that stuff, and you don't have to worry about it getting into your pot at all. So these are a couple others. This is another one of my gardens where I use, we have a lot of gophers in this garden. This is the garden, this is the bed that he chewed through, that gopher chewed through and ate everything. I'm just waiting for him to get into the others. But now what I'm doing is I'm bringing in pots, and I'm just placing the pots right on top. I have my drip irrigation there still, so I've got water there. And because we have gophers, I just lay down a huge thickness of straw so that the kids kind of aren't falling into the holes, and I just make sure that the holes are kind of flat when I go in there. So I use straw in that garden. And then this is also in another area at the high school. It was a makeshift. We decided for a couple years there that we were growing pumpkins for everybody in the school, and we didn't really have garden bed space for that. So we set up hay bales, and there's a whole process. You can look it up online. There's a whole process that you go through, adding soil, adding nutrients to the hay bales, letting it decompose for a few months, and then they're ready to grow in, and you can grow in them. And we grew pumpkins in these very successfully. And I just set a simple drip over the top of them. You can see the drip line coming up. And when they were done, I used the straw in my garden beds for mulch, and then just removed the drip and I had a little turn-off valve for that drip. These are also in my high school garden. We have wine barrels. That is a fig tree growing out of that wine barrel. It grows really good in that wine barrel. I don't have to worry about weeds. And this is just a mailing crate. One of the parents had something delivered to their house and then brought me, and it's still heavy duty. So anything that's wood, that's heavy duty, the kids just painted this so it looks pretty, and we planted our blackberries in it. This is over at LifeLab. LifeLab has this really great root see-through planter where you can watch carrots, and that's chard, and I think that's carrot over there, and you can see the roots growing in, so that's an educational thing that you might be able to build that would be great for the kids. And then I also really love, I have access to, you can look on Craigslist, I find food grade 55-gallon barrels all the time for about 10 to 15 bucks. This one in particular, I bought them for 10 bucks on Craigslist, and somebody had melted the sides and pulled them out so I could plant strawberries all around the whole thing, and then the strawberries. This is one of my best strawberry growing barrels. The strawberries on the ground will often get munched by not slugs, salbugs and pillbugs. They love the strawberries, and if they're all touching the ground, you can kiss that strawberry goodbye. But if you have them in something hanging like this, it works really great. And the reason why I like these barrels is because they're food grade plastic, so you don't have to worry about contaminants. And it holds the soil really well and keeps it cool because it's not a black plastic. And the strawberries just hang from there and they don't get eaten. And so my kids just kind of ruffle around and eat the strawberries. It's really great.
How do you add irrigation to this? Because when I grew strawberries in something like this, but I found it difficult to keep giving water every day.
Yeah, so behind this I have, you can probably see, I have a little line coming in. And I used a drip line that is drips every 6 inches. And I wrapped it around, so here's the barrel. I wrapped it around here, and then I wrapped another one around here. So it's dripping every 6 inches on 2 different drip lines. And then that drips down. And then every time that I'm in the garden with the kids, if it's not raining, they're watering. And they're watering thoroughly. And we'll talk about watering and how important it is to know how to water correctly, because none of us know how to water correctly. And so we teach the kids that, and so they'll spend a good 10 minutes watering that, once a week in the summer. So it gets that too, or in the summer months.
Do you buy the barrels new?
No, in fact, these were all honey barrels. Not that one, but I buy honey barrels. I have a honey contact in Santa Cruz, and he actually gives me these barrels where there's tons of honey. And it's even like fermenting in there. It's, so I cut them in half. I open the barrels and I let them sit for a couple of weeks, and the bees come and get the honey for me. They clean the honey completely out. The plastic's completely clean. They take it all. So I let them do that. So I open it up, and then I drill holes into the bottom, very big holes into the bottom, to make sure that drainage is good.
For that blue barrel?
Yeah, for that blue barrel has lots of holes in the bottom of that blue barrel. But this one didn't have, I bought these ones separate. They were already cut for strawberries, and then the top was already cut off. But usually I get them with the top and bottom still on, and I just cut it in half and open them up. And they're the same size as wine barrels, but cheaper. Cheaper.
I would just caution folks to make sure you know what was in the barrels
Yeah.
before you plant, especially food.
It has to be food grade. You gotta buy the food grade too. Like, what food could be in there that would be bad?
I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah.
How do you cut them?
Olive barrels.
What's that?
How do you cut them?
I use a saw. I use a
Regular
saw,
saw.
like I couldn't tell you what it's called. My husband helps me with that. It's just no, it's not a handsaw, it's electric. Yeah, it's Sawzall, that sounds about right, something like that. Here's another garden that I teach in. The students, this is a very bad gopher. We have gophers and we have Bermuda grass. It's inevitable. So this garden, the teacher had been, before I took this garden over, the teacher had been mulching and making the kids pull the Bermuda grass, and that's all they were doing was mulching and pulling weeds and not being able to grow anything. And so she decided to have the kids make their own beds, and this is one of the beds they came up with. They had bricks all around. This is their potato bed. And then they took redwood, but you can see the gophers right there, okay? But as long as we have food in these barrels and not down there, the gophers go away eventually. They might come back year after year just to see if there's any food, but as soon as you get the food out of the ground, there's nothing for them to eat, and they won't come into your garden. And then these are redwood planters that are actually sliced in half and brought in together and put together, and then we planted, that's basil, and I think that was a squash over there that we planted in them. But beautiful. I love this kind of, and we'll get into all kinds. I love unique containers for plants.
With
You brought those from outside?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And this is all recycled wood and stuff, yeah.
Another question?
Now, these beds are not gonna last as long as you want them to. So know if you want something that lasts, use wine barrels, use containers that aren't gonna rot. And when you use wine barrels, you don't wanna put them on the ground. You wanna put them on bricks or something, because as soon as that wood touches the ground, it starts decomposing, and the decomposers come up and start eating it. And so within 5 years, that wine barrel might be gone. So you want to make sure that you put them up. You could just put, those red bricks, like 3 red bricks underneath, and just get it up off the ground a little bit.
But looking at the rules,
Yeah.
right, I was thinking of building something at home, a container, which had one side plastic, other 3 sides wood, so that we can see all the way through plastic. Do you think that's a good idea?
Oh, the clear plastic?
The
Oh, like
plastic.
this root one here?
Yes, the root one.
Yeah,
You think that's a good idea?
it's a good idea, but where is it?
You have to
Sorry.
have a cover for the plastic.
You have to
bag.
have a cover, and I was gonna show you, there is a cover here. So
Yeah.
see this cover here, it flips up and covers that. You have to cover it.
No, like a thick plastic,
If it's clear, you're gonna grow algae, and your plants are gonna get too hot, and I don't know what else, but not a good idea. So you always wanna make sure you cover that. And that's
But you
just
can
for
open it.
opening and viewing. But you can just do something smaller and similar in a classroom if you're just gonna grow like 1 carrot, and that might grow fine. Yeah. But if it's outside, no.
one side of the 4-side container, isn't that wouldn't be good?
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah, you just need a door.
Well, you know what? Try it. See what happens. I don't know, actually. I'm not sure. I'm not positive. Yeah, take it. I also find you guys have this great Santa Clara dump day in Santa Clara, like a whole month of dumping, and for me as a gardener, guess what? I find all kinds. Like I spend an hour every weekend going out. That's where I found all of these rusted out wheelbarrows, broken wheelbarrows. They're not the best to grow in, but they do just fine. You just need to make sure you get a good drip on them and make sure the plant is getting a good water drip, because they do heat up a little bit. But I have it on the other side of the greenhouse. It doesn't get like straight on sun, and they're so cute in the garden. This is an old metal ice chest, which I just drilled holes. I found that on the side of the road too. Drilled holes in the bottom, and I plant flowers in those. Or the kids do. Here's another thing. I've never done this, but I've had other teachers who have. This is something simple that you can even have in your classroom or just right outside of your classroom. It's a self-watering container that the students can build together. It's a nice project. And it's perfect for salad greens. Excuse me. Now, what about tires? So, lots of school gardens use tires, lots of gardens use tires. I can tell you, I have tires. This is my high school garden right here. I have tires. I grow things that aren't edible in them, and only things that aren't edible. Because they do off-gas, they do leach. They have chemicals and metal contaminants in the tire, and yeah, they might leach out on the car, but they're still leaching. And secondly, nobody's really done any scientific, calculations on that growing out of tires. I'm not sure that they will, but I have parents who have come in and said, what's going on here? Why are you putting tires in the garden? I have concerned parents. So if I have a concerned parent, I don't want to do that. So I will often just say, oh yeah, I have these tires and we're recycling these tires and to get rid of them or whatever, and we're just growing things that aren't edible in there. But I can say that it's probably not the best idea for a garden. But you can see lots of gardens. You can even make little seats out of them. That's kind of cute. And that would be probably very acceptable in a garden. You could put some oilcloth over these so that they're waterproof even. And there's a little sandbox. I think that would be acceptable too. Just be careful of using tires in your garden. But they're free, and you can find them free anywhere, any tire store. So they're used a lot. So when you're designing your garden, you might, should have turned this one the other way. But you can see that you want a shady area with benches and tables. Here's where your annual flowers are. You've got a food prep table, a sink to wash hands or dishes, insect-loving plants, some perennials and flowers, a tool shed, a greenhouse, your compost bins. You want to put your compost bins in a shady spot, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. You have an herb bed, central location with a wind, what do you call those? I'm losing the name.
Wind vane?
Wind vanes, yes, wind vanes. And then here's their annual beds. They have a space just for their annuals, which we also have in our gardens. And then a native area. So this is a very simple, it's kind of complex, but it's a very simple plan. And this is something that you guys can do to kind of design your space, okay? And this one was from John Fisher at Life Lab. This is his garden at Pescadero School. That's where his kids went to school. And you can see his is very elaborate. So, he's got like a stadium seating over here with the kids and, this beautiful labyrinth of flowers here. It's just very, very professionally done up. But his garden is very successful. So, it's hard to read. It is in your book, so you can look at it in your book a little bit closer, and you can read all those little words in there. So, one thing that you can do for your garden is kind of go on a garden scavenger hunt if your garden's already in existence. And while you're in that scavenger hunt kind of looking for things, there's you can see on page 31, you might want to find 2 places where art has been incorporated in the garden. Find areas for groups to gather and teach. What types of composting systems are used in the garden? Find an area planted with perennials that provides habitat for garden wildlife. Find an area where tools and equipment are stored. So this is kind of just an activity for you to do in your own garden if it's already started. And Mr. Rogers says it best. I really, please think of the children first. If you ever have anything to do with their entertainment, their food, their toys, their custody, their health care, their education, listen to the children, learn about them. Learn from them and think of the children first. And I can't emphasize this enough. If you want your kids to work in that garden and love that garden, you need to make sure that they want what's in there and that they take ownership and that you say every day, well, this is your garden. What do you want to grow today? And this is your garden. What are you going to do to make it pretty today? And then also ask them, what do you guys want to do here? Are you having fun in the garden? What could we do differently that might make it more fun for you? What have you seen in other gardens that you would like to have here? Do you want to eat oranges? Well, maybe we should plant an orange tree. Do you want to have carrots? Well, let's plant some carrots. Do you want to have a pizza at the end of the year? Well, let's get ready to plant for that pizza. Ask them what they want. It's so important, and they know exactly what they want. So ask them. It's so important. So let's talk about choosing plants and planting times.